Joining me now is Jim Pfaff of the Conservative Caucus.org, the Conservative Caucus.org. Hi, Jim. Welcome back to the broadcast. Thanks for being with us.
Thanks, sir. Good to see you.
You too, my friend. Interesting news tonight we have from Libs of TikTok. The DOD just withdrew the nomination of Admiral Michael Donley for Vice Admiral and Commander of the 7th Fleet after discovering he permitted drag shows on board the USS Ronald Reagan. I don't know how they didn't know this. We talked about this when it happened some time ago. So what? Do these people not have search engines on their computer? Do some of these people in the administration not have search engines on their computer, Jim?
I don't know how you missed this one. And when you add to that every nominee that they put across, they do a deep dive search to see if they were negative on Donald Trump on social media. So you'd figure they'd get this one somehow. I don't even have a good answer for it. And it's good that they address this because it needs to be very clear to the military. We're not doing this kind of stuff anymore. We're not doing DEI. We're not doing LGBTQ special pride, whatever. We're about, killing people and breaking things if we have to, if we ever find ourselves in war. Yep. That's what a military needs to train to do. That's all they need to be focused on, and force capability is it. So yeah, no room for any of this.
Yeah. Now, the Jeffrey Epstein story keeps rolling on. And I guess I've interviewed Alan Dershowitz probably a month ago, many times. And apparently Sean Spicer, the former White House spokesperson, press secretary for Trump in the first term, interviewed him as well. Listen to this. Here we go.
This is not an opinion. This is a fact. I have seen, remember, I was accused falsely in the Epstein, and ultimately I was completely cleared. The woman admitted that she may have mistook me for somebody else and withdrew all of her lawsuits. And so from day one, from the day I was accused, I said I want every document out because I knew every document would prove I was innocent. So let me tell you, I know for a fact documents are being suppressed. And they're being suppressed to protect individuals. I know the names of the individuals. I know why they're being suppressed. I know who's suppressing them. But I'm bound by confidentiality from a judge and cases, and I can't disclose what I know. But I hand to God, I know the names of people whose files are being suppressed in order to protect them. And that's wrong.
Just out of curiosity, without names, are these politicians, business leaders, both?
They're everything. And let me tell you, a lot of them are, at least one of them is somebody who was accused. Others are accusers. And the judges have said, if somebody calls themselves a victim, we're not going to give any information about them. But they may not be victims. They may be perpetrators. So we don't have information about false accusers. And we know there have been many false accusers who have accused innocent people for money. And those records are being deliberately, willfully suppressed. And they shouldn't be suppressed. If the accusation is allowed out, so should the material that diminishes the credibility of the accuser. We want total transparency on this. Every single document, no redaction. That's what I've said from day one. I waive any of my rights of privacy. Anything there is about me, I'm happy because it will be exculpatory. Because I know I haven't touched a woman other than my wife from the day I met Jeffrey Epstein. I don't even hug people, but I was falsely accused and I was able to prove it. And I was able to prove it through documents. And I want other people to be able to disprove false accusations through documents. But these documents are being suppressed and withheld.
Wow, that is a really powerful clip, Jim.
Yeah, and I have no reason to disbelieve any of it. Obviously, you never know everything about everyone, and you always wonder. But the reality is, I think Alan Dershowitz has been very forthcoming and straight up on this. I feel confident that he is innocent. But it does bring up beyond Alan Dershowitz and his situation, it brings up the main point here. We need to make sure that this information gets out. There is a need for people to know what's going on, particularly now after the way that this has been handled over the last week. And it's not, I will say, I've been saying all the time, the Epstein files are not the number one issue that we need to be worried about in this country. There are some really key issues like what we got out of the Radcliffe letter that we can really go after main actors who have built this deep state propaganda machine. I was just listening to a Patrick Bet-David interview with a former CIA agent who really laid out how much of a scumbag John Brennan is and was from the 90s until now. These people who have been building out this ability to take down political opponents out of the federal government, that needs to be shut down. Now, the Epstein files connect in there somewhere, but I don't know for sure that it's the number one thing. But we need the transparency. We got to change this paradigm.
Indeed, we do. All right, let's switch to Texas. Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, is running for the U.S. Senate against John Cornyn, current U.S. Senator. I've interviewed Ken in person a couple times and then via technology. And I've always enjoyed the opportunity to interview him. And I was kind of rooting for him, that's for sure. But I don't know what's going to happen now. There's always two sides to every story. But here's what his wife put out. Have you seen this, Jim?
I have not.
Senator Angela Paxton. Today, after 38 years of marriage, I filed for divorce on biblical grounds. I believe marriage is a sacred covenant, and I've earnestly pursued reconciliation. But in light of recent discoveries, I do not believe that it honors God or is loving to myself, my children, or kin to remain in the marriage. I move forward with complete confidence that God is always working everything together for the good of those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. That's her statement. His statement. After facing the pressures of countless political attacks and public scrutiny, Angela and I have decided to start a new chapter in our lives. I could not be any more proud or grateful for the incredible family that God has blessed us with, and I remain committed to supporting our amazing children and grandchildren. I ask for your prayers and privacy at this time, end quote. It's always sad to see something like this, and I feel for both parties, regardless of who's to blame. You know, we all have feet of clay, and you don't ever want to see a marriage divided, particularly when there are also children and grandchildren involved. So this isn't, I don't like to do, my audience knows that I don't do a lot of sex scandals and different tabloid type garbage. I don't have a stomach for it. I'm only bringing this up because of the fact that this gentleman, Mr. Paxton, is running for the U.S. Senate primary against Cornyn. Now, he was quite ahead in the polls. Others are saying now tonight, he's done. It's over. What are your thoughts on this?
Well, it's hard to tell whether he's done. This is a big blow, obviously. Well, and I feel for the family. I think we should pray for the family, and maybe there's some reconciliation. But that's a personal issue. On a political issue, this is really sad for America in a way, too, if Ken has gone down the wrong path and loses out on this, because John Cornyn is one of our biggest problems in Washington, D.C. He epitomizes the rot that we have in D.C. And I'd argued for a long time. Everyone tried to say how immoral and horrible Donald Trump was. And through all he's been through, I mean, he's a human being, so he's sinned. But, the guy is incredibly clean compared to almost anyone else in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is filled with scumbags. There are a lot of good people there, but they are far from a majority, far from getting to a plurality even. Yeah, and keep in mind, because I'm just saying this to compare Ken Paxton. This is a bad situation, but we've got dozens of members of Congress who've had tens of millions of dollars paid out to cover their sexual abuse and sexual scandals inside their offices, and we don't even know what happened. Think about that for just a second. And that's a confirmed fact. It's been reported publicly. And, when I was working on Capitol Hill, we saw that was exactly what was happening. This kind of issue is really important for us to take a look at ourselves as we go into 2026 and ask, do we really want to return that person to Congress? We need to ask that serious question as voters all the time. Ronald Reagan famously said that politics is the world's second oldest profession, and it bears a resemblance to the oldest profession, which, by the way, is supposed to be prostitution. There's a very real problem with politicians. I don't think Ken Paxton is the worst of them. It's really sad, that what happened here, and I hope that he can make it through this and they can reconcile somehow. But I look at what I know goes on in Washington, D.C. It's far worse than what we're seeing here with Ken Paxton. So we'll see what happens. It'd be an opportunity lost if he can't pull this out for some reason. And it looks like he may not be able to.
Yeah, that would be unfortunate because I think he would be a big asset to President Trump.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to this. I guess Mario is reporting that ICE raid turns California weed farm into total chaos. Federal agents stormed a California cannabis farm and triggered a full-on showdown with furious protesters. Come here, Dolly. Crowd, you okay? A little thunder. She doesn't like the thunder. Crowds blocked vans, shouted at officers, and tried to stop arrests before smoke canisters sent people scattering. ICE has already detained an unknown number of undocumented workers as tensions keep boiling with more protesters arriving. Take a look at some of this footage here, folks. Apparently, look at that. Apparently, Jim, they have had to fly in like helicopters. They've had to fly in water bottles, all kinds of water. I don't think they were preparing to be there that long. And apparently, they've had to fly in a bunch of resources. This is getting a lot of attention online tonight, as these raids. Now, this is kind of interesting because we heard earlier that the farms were going to get a little bit of a pass. Remember that?
Yeah.
The farms were going to get a pass, but apparently now the farms and the hotels are not getting a pass. Which, of course, a lot of people were upset about that. They're like, we don't need amnesty for any group. Everybody's got to be treated the same. And but that's what's going on right now.
Well, it's just a messy business, made messy by Joe Biden. We could talk about the mess of this particular incident, which is unfortunate and frustrating to see and sad. Let's be very clear. This is a problem because of Joe Biden and Democrats. Mm-hmm. They created this debacle that Donald Trump is thankfully working very hard to clean up. By the way, people were upset when Donald Trump talked about the farmers, but he's made it very clear there's going to be no amnesty for these people working for the farmers. And I'm fine if that's kind of the last thing that you go after, but eventually you need to go after that. You need to fix that problem as well, too. There's a whole slew of hundreds of thousands, name millions of illegal aliens who need to leave this country. And if they want to come back, they need to use the CBP app, get their $1,000, I guess is what they're given, and then come back and reapply if you'd like to try to come into our country the right way. We have to restore legality in this system. So you're going to get a mess like this when you're trying to get it right. The worst mess that is happening right now is Democrat mayors who are far superior in the chaos that they create opposing the lawful duties of ICE agents to remove illegals and to process them outside of the country.
Yep. Let's see what else we got here. Let's see what else. There's a lot in the news. What do you guys? Anything you've been looking at before I bring up another one I've got?
Yeah, no, you're kind of hitting all of them. I will say this. I want to put some light on this. It's not a U.S. issue, but Donald Trump took some action this week that I think was incredibly positive. Donald Trump just imposed a 50% tariff on Brazil. Lula da Silva, the president there, and Alexandre de Moraes, who heads up the Supreme Court, have been imposing a censorship regime on that country for years now. They are about to put former President Jair Bolsonaro on a trial, saying that he was attempting a coup, the charges of which are by definition false because he was up in Florida at the time that the January 8th thing supposedly happened. Donald Trump took serious action. But I'm convinced by the information that I have, and I have lots of contacts down in Brazil. I know about a dozen members of the Congress of Deputies are friends of mine. I talk to them regularly. I know many journalists who are here in exile, conservative journalists. That election was stolen, in my estimation. I'm not saying any of them are claiming that. Some are. But I'm convinced that election was stolen. There are no paper ballots. There's no follow through on it. You remember Tucker Carlson did a major interview with Jair Bolsonaro just prior to that election in 2022. This is a serious issue in this hemisphere because of the fact that Brazil and Lula da Silva are attempting to do to Brazil what was done to Venezuela. And in fact, that's inspired by something that Lula da Silva started back in 1990 called the Sao Paulo Forum. He worked with Fidel Castro and others in the region to advance socialism and communism in countries in South and Latin America. They attempted to push this forward. This Lula da Silva coming back into power in what I'm convinced was a stolen election that the Joe Biden administration also was part of. They're attempting to put this country under authoritarian rule. I have many dear friends in Brazil, and I'm very concerned about it. But we here in the United States need to be concerned because Alexandre de Moraes, the judge in the Supreme Court, has been ruling against social media platforms, literally attempting to censor speech in this country as well. And so this is one major development in the region. The Monroe Doctrine applies, in my opinion. China and Iran are closer to the Brazilian government right now than we are. They haven't even appointed an ambassador to the United States yet. That's how, and Lula is constantly trashing Donald Trump, saying he's a criminal, just blah, 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 all the same Democrat stuff. So that's a big major development. We're going to see how that plays out, but it's a big uproar right now in Brazil. And there are a lot of Brazilians that are incredibly pleased by the action that Donald Trump has taken. You can count me as an American who's very proud that he's done that.
Yeah, indeed. Indeed. I want to go to this story right here. Gatestone Institute. This is my friend Daniel Greenfield. I have him on as a guest fairly often. A radical company is paying Supreme Court justices millions of dollars. Justice Jackson reportedly received a almost $900,000 advance for her memoir. It is now reporting $2 million in profits last year. These would be record numbers for a Supreme Court justice's biography from a book that hardly anyone had noticed when it came out. While books can become unexpected success, once released, there was a little sign of that happening. By the way, I've written 16 books, I think, over the years since 1990. The average book in America sells about 4,000 copies. That might shock a lot of people, but the average book in America only sells about 4,000 copies. So when you talk about someone getting this kind of money, what you like to see is, did she really sell this many copies? I like to see it. Now, Penguin Random House will be publishing Justice Amy Coney Barrett's book, for which she received, according to this, a $2 million advance. That's money that the publisher seems even less likely to recoup, considering that Barrett is hated among leftists and has a mixed approval rating among conservatives. Let me just stop right there. Usually an advance is an advance against future sales. So they're counting on her book selling so many copies that they would pay her at least $2 million and more to recoup that. So she's getting $2 million in royalties up front, which means the publisher's saying, we believe we can sell enough copies of this book that you'd make in royalties at least $2 million. And so here's your advance. Really? Again, I just told you what the average book sells. So how is this possible?
I'm going to tell you something. It's very shady to me. On the New York Times bestseller list, most of those books don't break 1 million copies. So how are you making $2 million, say, if you sell, and which a lot of them do, 150,000 to 350,000 copies, and you're going to make $2 million off of that? Is she going to sell 350,000 copies? I mean, you are right about her. I'm more suspicious of Ketanji Brown Jackson because there's nobody that's going to buy that book. No one's interested. And in fact, people on the left aren't going to be interested. You've even got Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, particularly Elena Kagan, really making her look foolish in some of these recent Supreme Court decisions because she's so stupid about them. She's not even going by the law. I mean, even if Elena Kagan is arguing against what your reasoning is, you're pretty bad and radical leftist. And so what you always have to be careful. Remember how everyone was going after Justice Thomas because he had friends and he'd go on a flight here or a vacation there.
Or got some kind of loan for a motorhome or something, motor coach. RV.
Yeah, and so they're beating up on him. Why is no one beating up on these two ladies? And their deal is far worse.
Verbally,
they don't prove that they can sell these copies. If they don't sell these copies, all that is a transfer of money. Politicians do this too. There are many politicians on Capitol Hill who have had these sort of advantages given to them, and no one calls them out on it.
Yeah. Well, look, it goes on to say past polls show the majority of the country can't even name a single Supreme Court justice. Yet they're receiving celebrity-level advances for books no one cares about. Supreme Court Justice Sonia Sotomayor had previously criticized for not recusing herself in a case involving Penguin, which paid her over $3 million. Good grief. Penguin is actually Bertelsmann, a German ex-Nazi publishing giant that has waged war on American parents, promoted racism, and is trying to, what's that word? Monopolistically gobble up all that's a great word there, Daniel Greenfield. American publishing. Ibrahim X, Hindi's How to Be an Anarchist, Robin DiAngelo's White Fragility, Tanisha Coates' Between the World and Me, and during World War II, the Christmas book of the Hitler Youth, all came out of Bertelsmann. I guess an ex-Nazi German ex-Nazi publishing giant? Whoa. While the ex-Nazi foreign corporation operates under familiar names like Penguin, Random House, Doubleday, Ballantine, Knopf, Viking, Putnam, Pandem, Del Rey, Golden Books. Wow, really? Golden Books? The ones from when I was a kid? And many others. It's actually a foreign company publishing deeply destructive products. Even as parents tried to stop their children from being exposed to sexually inappropriate content, former CEO Marcus Dole went to war against them with a $500,000 legal fund. A foreign company has tried to completely monopolize American publishing by seizing control of Simon & Schuster and has intervened in American politics is troubling. Bertelsmann millions have gone mostly unexamined, even as ProPublica, a leftist advocacy group, launched a smear campaign against Justice Thomas. You just brought that up. The Thomas smears were repeated by every media outlet in the country, which pursued the 76-year-old justice, 96-year-old mother, to find out where exactly she lives and who paid the tuition of his grandnephew, yet shrug when the Supreme Court can't even form a quorum over millions from a multinational giant that is business before the court being directed to justices. Justice Jackson, making millions from a ghost-written memoir after spending less time on the bench than most dust cloths, is an equally obvious exercise in cashing in, not literary inspiration. I don't think the woman could write a book, to be honest with you, as dumb as she seems. No wonder she has to have a ghostwriter.
Yeah, well, that and often they're also very busy. So, a ghostwriter is not the biggest problem. It's just the fact that she shouldn't make any money on the book. By the way, I just looked it up. To make the New York Times bestseller list, you have to sell between 5,000 and 10,000 copies. The the first year sales of most New York Times bestsellers generally fall between 10,000 and 100,000. And royalties wise, people make between $1 and $3 a book. I don't know where that $2 million is going to come from, but it ain't going to coming from book sales.
Remember, I said the average book sells 4,000 copies.
Yeah.
And you're saying that you can get on the New York Times
with 5. Yeah. It's crazy. Yeah, and you're probably down, 25 to 50 somewhere. But still, I mean, that's amongst hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of books that are printed out every year, or thousands maybe even. So.
Oh yeah, thousands.
Yeah.
It just keeps getting weirder and weirder. Let's see what else we got. Washington Times, going nowhere. Case study finds 99% of Biden's illegal immigrants, his immigrant parolees, are still in the U.S., 99% of them. Well, no wonder Tom Homan was in front of the White House last week saying the deportations are not going nearly fast enough. Who is?
Well, he's going to have the money to.
Huh?
I was going to say he's going to have the money to do it now.
Yeah, with the big beautiful bill.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a lot of money. They're going to be hiring 8,000 agents for ICE, and then they're going to have special ops. I think the number, if I recall correctly, was 4,000 to 6,000. I mean, there are going to be a lot of people coming on board. It's going to take a little time for some of them to get trained. Some of them are going to come back into the service because they know that something needs to be done. They're going to have the money to put the effort up now. And he is right. It's not going quickly enough. But if anyone's going to get this done, it's Tom Homan. Of all the people in Trump's orbit, the people he's brought on board to do things, but hands down, the most impressive person is Tom Homan. He's totally dedicated to this. He actually knows what he's doing. He sacrificed a lot of money that he could be earning otherwise to do this. He's totally in on this. I'm incredibly impressed with him, and I know he's going to get the job done now that he's going to have the resources.
We've been talking a lot here. Excuse me. We've been talking a lot on our program about what many former intelligence people say is a very high-level risk from Al-Qaeda against the country, and particularly airline, with what is being described as invisible bomb, because they're not made of anything metal or anything else to be picked up from scanners. And I guess they takes a syringe with fluid in it, you inject, it runs through a line, goes into the other part, and they can mix it later. They can keep the two parts separate, mix it later, and get on airplanes with them. And apparently, according to people like Sarah Adams and former CIA and others, they're saying that we've got a real problem with Al-Qaeda. This is being confirmed by other sources that I've interviewed this week on TV. And the Air Marshal National Council, they put this out. Air marshals in disarray. These two bureaucrats are destroying our aviation security. Training has been slashed. FAMs being taken off flight, federal air marshals, off flights to be prison guards. The threats to the homeland are unprecedented. Federal air marshals stripped of their firearms. No more ammo due to budget mismanagement. Federal air marshals have been instructed to dry fire on the range. Not a joke. President Trump, fire these fools. That's from the Air Marshals National Council. So it's a weird week because they're not going to scan shoes, and others are saying they can get these bombs in their shoes. That the shoe bomber, the underwear bomber, that was old technology. Technology you have now is much more advanced, these experts are telling me, and I've interviewed some on the air. And we're pulling air marshals off the planes to check for headlights and walk them to the bathroom down on the border. And then we're taking some of the Syrian groups off the watch list. Something doesn't smell right. I'm afraid that they're setting up President Trump's administration. Jim?
It very well could be. I mean, we still have deep state actors throughout government. And I'm convinced that the Epstein file thing was a deep state actor, frankly. Remember, that memo was not dated and it was not signed. It was probably in draft form. They maybe were still going down this path, but it was thrown out on a Sunday night to Axios. I'm sorry. So that there are a lot of quirky things. There's a lot of work still to be done to clean up this government. Yep. And I believe that Trump's going to really do that, but it's a real challenge. As to this specific threat, it's interesting that came out about the same time that we were just notified that we're not going to have to take off our shoes anymore at the airport. Yep. Now, I always thought that shoe thing was stupid. Richard Reed, who was the perpetrator, who had a bomb in the heel of his shoe.
We're about running out of time.
Okay, 20 years ago, it didn't play out. But this does sound serious. We'll see what happens with it.
Take care, guys. Tonight on the Worldview Report, President Trump comes under increasing fire for his administration's failure to deliver on a campaign promise to release the full Epstein client list. the president floats the idea of a federal takeover of Washington, D.C. and maybe